So when I was younger, I used to think about the thing about dating. What is dating? I grew up Christian from a child, and we learn about things about life. So what I noticed was when I was in high school, and a lot of people who made the decision to start dating really young, I remember I used to think that they don't know who they are yet, and they're getting into a structure or relationship in which they would have to function in a way where they would need to impress the other person and meet that person's needs or desires. What I'm trying to say is that I used to see people getting into relationships, and I used to think you're getting into a relationship yet you don't know who you are as a person yet. So then if you don't know who you are, how do you know what to look for? And it used to concern me. At that time, I did not start dating. I still believed that God would find me this person who He had prepared for me. So my focus was serving God and finding out who I am. But I used to observe the people around me so that I could figure this out. And what I saw was, when you want to get into a relationship, you would have to, if you like someone, then you would need to be the kind of person that person would like. So you would adapt yourself to that person. And it was concerning because I'm trying to find out who I am as a person. I'm sure that person would want to do that too. So how would I know what I want if I don't know who I am? Which is why at that time I decided not to get into a relationship. I was the kind of person who was trying to be the perfect Christian. So whatever I heard in church, I would apply to my daily life. And one of the things that is taught is that one should live by the Spirit. So the Spirit would always talk to me and speak to me and give me advice. And I felt like I would understand what was happening around me. I would understand what was happening to the people in my class, to how they were making decisions. And I'm sure a lot of us do this. God told me that a lot of things about human nature can be seen in high school. Like a lot of the structures that we understand happens there. For a while, God had been telling me that, and then later on He explained to me why. It's that transition that you make from childhood to adulthood, that so many changes happens within yourself, within your mind, within your body. Your hormones change, you're transitioning to an adult. So you end up in this environment with a lot of people, and all these social structures present themselves. Who we are in society presents itself. Whether you are the athletic type, whether you are a person who's trying to gain reputation from being cool, whether you are a person who is academically inclined, whether you are like me, who was the Christian type, the religious type, who was like raised up in church and trying to pursue a good life and figure that out. And that plays itself out in high school, but it actually doesn't change after high school. I realized that when I look at people, when I look at the functions in society, they say keeping up with the Joneses. That happens in high school. When you look at trying to rise up to leadership positions, reputation is important. The ability to communicate ideas within society is important. And those ideas are communicated a lot of times visually. When you go for a job interview, you have to be concerned about what you wear, about how you look, and that affects the impression you make within the job. Okay, so essentially what I'm trying to say is that when I was younger and I saw when people got into relationships, they were getting into relationships before they knew who they were. And my thinking, or maybe God talking to me about these things, was, how are they going to know what they want if they don't know who they are yet? So my intention was to find out who I am first before I get into that sort of a relationship. So the second thing in high school I saw was that as a Christian person, I was following the Holy Spirit, being taught in church that one should follow the Spirit. And I always kept that separate from academics. And later on in life, I would struggle in academics because I had that separation between spirit and the mind and thinking. And I struggled for a while until God showed me that thinking is actually spiritual. That ideas you can feel and sense in the spirit. A lot of things that exist in society are spiritual. In fact, everything is spiritual. But what I'm trying to say is, as a Christian person, I didn't know that. And later on, I realized in school, you're actually not taught about spiritual things, even though the actual act of thinking is spiritual. When you have to read something and summarize it, it is actually something spiritual. So you have the spirit, and then high school teaches you how the spirit. The second thing is dating. I didn't know dating was a deception. In my mind, I was thinking, I believed in God, and I believed God could do anything. So I was like, okay, fine. If God can do anything, then I want to be with the person who God created me to be with. And you have this idea of the soulmate or this perfect person that should be with you. And there came a point in my life when I followed that emotion, and that emotion ended up being untrue, and it ended up changing my framework of understanding. Then I had to figure out how am I supposed to live my life, because I'm following feelings, the information sources around me, like movies, TV, the media, even society as a whole, and the function of dating in society is saying a certain thing. You should do what you feel. But here's a situation where what you feel is incorrect. So what does one do in that case? When what you feel is incorrect, then you should follow wisdom. That was a big revelation to me at the time, because everything in the information sources says do what you feel. So the important thing is one should be led by the Spirit, to have an understanding of what emotions are, that they are signals that come into your physical being, but originating from different areas. Meaning it could be your mind, it could be your body and your physical desires like hunger, things like that there. Or it could be ideas that as human beings we are designed to respond to. We actually have a design for ideas, a design for these things. So when I studied marketing later on at university level, you learn about the consumer decision-making process. And these processes are mapped out. And it made me think, wait a minute, how are these processes mapped out? Because human nature is a certain way, and if human nature is a certain way, it means it has a design, and if it has a design, it means it has a designer. So what is that design? And then from what I'm seeing is, we desire the ideas of God. We essentially desire God. We created for God to desire the ideas of God. So it seems everything in our life responds to that. In the Bible, it says all of creation declares the glory of God. We are even God's creation. But what I'm seeing is we desire God because these ideas that we desire are parts of God's character, parts of God's personality that we see in the physical world. When you look for relationships, when you look for our sense of self, when you look for the things that we do, whether it's taking part in sports or certain activities, we desire all those things with God's ideas in them. In essence, we are looking for God by design. So even when people do bad things, they want the good part of the bad thing. So they are still, even though in the deception of sin, they are still trying to find God, even though they have been deceived. We are looking for God in the things of this world, even in relationships. And what I have seen is that dating has been used as a mechanism to lead us away from God, because we are trying to find these ideas that God created us to desire. We are trying to find those ideas in a relationship of dating. And something that always concerns me is the structure of dating does not exist in the Bible. In the Bible, it talks about marriage, it talks about courtship, but not dating in the way we see it in modern society. And what God showed me was that dating is created in many ways as a doorway to sin. So it's presented in a bait and switch method, a bait and switch where you get baited by a good idea, but then when you go for that idea, you realize it has been a con that gets switched to something that's damaging to you, that's something that you don't actually want, the bait and switch. And what I see is that people are looking for love, people are looking for companionship, and dating is presented as a solution to this. But what happens in dating is that one's physical desires are encouraged to be indulged in. And that is sin. That is regarded as a sexual sin, sexual immorality. That is what is encouraged in dating, but it is presented as secondary in the goal of finding love, finding intimacy. But dating doesn't achieve that goal. Because I notice when people date, at first, if they do fall in love and they break up with the person they fall in love with, then their ideas change. Number one. Number two is their physical intimacy has already been compromised because that door was opened to a structure that could end. So in Christianity, marriage is supposed to be forever. And God designed us to desire marriage. And our emotions react to that, which is why it seems like dating is created as a mechanism to fool our conscience in the short term into indulging in these things. So that's what this whole idea of a relationship is built on trust with regard to dating. I mean, friendships obviously is built on trust as well, but I'm talking about specifically dating that has the added factor of physical intimacy. It seems like dating is a mechanism where one fools their short-term memory into thinking that this is a structure that's forever, even though it's not. And it works in the short term to fool your conscience so that one indulges in physical intimacies. And then it's devastating when there's a breakup. And then when you have a person who chooses to indulge in these physical intimacies as a recreation, then instead of having a relationship to fool the short-term memory, what happens is a shell gets built around a person's heart. At first a shell, and essentially your entire heart becomes like stone. The Bible even talks about God will take away your heart of stone. Why? Because sin wages war on your soul. Sin torments your soul. And when this starts happening, your heart sends signals. And in order to overcome this conscience, one has to make the decision to say, I'm going to choose to live my life in a sinful way. And then your heart creates the shell around it and eventually entirely becomes stone. So when that happens, you can't feel anything. And the reason why you can't feel anything is because what you are partaking of is losing meaning. Meaning is actually the original design. The original design is like when you desire something and you go that step, there is the step beyond that. And as you carry on along that path, you will find the full meaning. So with regard to dating, it's meant to be courtship that leads to marriage. And then marriage is where the physical intimacy would start. And the intention of that is fusion of two people who are not family, become family now for the offspring, for the children. Because remember now, within the family, the mother is connected to the child, the father is connected to the child. So what connects the mother and the father to each other? It's that physical intimacy that creates and solidifies this framework, and there's this fusion that happens. So literally, you become family with the person. That was God's intention. And when you indulge in dating that includes this physical intimacy, then what you are actually doing is moving away from this original design, taking away from this original design, and then you lose meaning. Because now you have all these sub-marriages, all these sub-fusions that happened. And then eventually your physical intimacy becomes public, it becomes recreation. And by design, this type of physical intimacy or sexual intimacy cannot be recreation and valuable at the same time. You have to choose one. And when you fool your subconscious into saying it can be done, you can't fool your subconscious. When people sin, I noticed that they have rules, and the rules involve fooling your subconscious. Secondly, the rules seem to be aligned with the original intention. The rules of sin seem to be aligned with God's original intention. Meaning, if you're going to be dating someone, you have to create this impression of it being forever for them to be comfortable. You have to be a good person. You have to be a person who's going to be committed to them. Now, if you're not following God's 10 commandments, then you're going to implement lies. And then that's going to be your daily functioning when you're in that relationship. You're going to realize the person's only going to respond to you when you present them with these ideas of forever or of long-termness. What I'm saying is the rules of sin involve God's original design as well. Which is why when women want to date many men, they still look for a husband type of man, somebody who's dominant, someone who's, well, in certain instances. So you have the emotional part where your heart has a shell around it regarding the entire meaning of what these ideas are supposed to be, but you still have certain feelings that exist. What I noticed is once you lose the sweet feelings of the original design, then you're following a rush, you're following a thrill, you're following an adrenaline response. And the adrenaline response is generally the hope of something or the danger of getting away with doing something wrong. But after you get away with it, you need to do something more extreme to get the same thrill, meaning it doesn't last forever. So you're going to end up having to go down that path of doing more and more sinful things in order to get the same thrill or to get that type of thrill, until finally you're living a lifestyle that has all these structures of sin. And then you have people who say how much they love sin because it gives them all these things. What they don't know is that they have been deceived. They have been drinking from fountains that are going to run dry. The Bible talks about the wages of sin is death, meaning death of the original ideas or death of the meaning of those ideas, which is what happens. Also, when Jesus met the adulterous woman at the well, when he was specifically talking about the adultery that she indulged in, he mentioned that she is looking for something, a spiritual well she's looking for, and she has all these fountains that are running dry, and Jesus said, if you drink from my fountain, you'll never run dry. That's what it meant. It meant that even in our sin, we look for spiritual things. But in that sin, we find fountains that run dry, and God is the fountain that never runs dry because He's the source of the original ideas. So we are looking for God. When you're a slave to sin, you're still following rules of sin which still align themselves to God's original ideas. So as a woman, when you want to pursue a long-term relationship that involves sin with a man, then you're going to have to show yourself to be pure. You have to show yourself to be faithful. You have to show yourself to be nurturing and to be all these kinds of things. And as a man, you're going to have to show yourself to be a provider, a leader, faithful, strong. And then if you, on both sides, you're doing that through deception, on a woman's side, you realize you're going to have all these hidden secrets about all the men that you have on your rotation, and all the things that you did in your past that are going to affect the man, because guess what? He still has that original design of desiring a woman who was pursuing purity. Maybe he was indulging in short-term interactions, but he knows that those short-term actions are a move away from what he would actually want long-term. The same thing with women. When you go for certain types of men, you wouldn't want to marry the F-boy that you are dealing with. And because men and women are different, the dynamics have a different effect. Like women would be more sensitive emotionally, which is why they always bring up the trauma that comes from a sinful lifestyle. As a man, you are meant to be strong, which is why when you create a home, you already have strength, and you look for, essentially when you want to create a home, you want to create a paradise for yourself. And a paradise involves the ideas of God, which involves a woman who pursued purity or some sort of purity, which is why by design men cannot handle a promiscuous woman, cannot give his heart, cannot open his heart, because he wants to open his heart at home. When he's dating, he's not opening up his heart, but when he wants to create a home, he wants to open up his heart. And he cannot open up his heart to somebody who has given herself to rough men by design. So sin has a bad effect on both sides in different ways, because number one, men and women are designed differently, but also as human beings we are designed differently depending on our purpose. So you get restored by God, meaning you find out how damaging sin is and you don't want to sin anymore, and God gives you a way out. If you still believe that sin is a good thing, then you're not actually repenting. You don't even know that sin is a bad thing. Once you've come to that understanding, then you can accept Christ. So you come to repentance. Otherwise, you're not repenting. You have to repent that you are a sinner. Alright. So now you're following Jesus. You're pursuing good things. You're pursuing God ideas. That's a good thing. Then you pursue God's original ideas that you see everywhere. Original ideas that still exist even in a sinful lifestyle. When you ask a woman what she wants in a man, she wants someone who's strong internally, externally. All these ideas of God she wants. The same with a man. When he wants a woman, he wants someone pure, someone virtuous, someone faithful. These are all godly ideas. And then if you try to bring two people who are sinful, trying to have this conversation, they're each going to say to each other, you're looking for something that's impossible to find. But is it impossible to find? It's impossible to find with people who are living a worldly lifestyle. But then when you come to the realization that you actually want these good ideas, who's pursuing these ideas? People who have been following God. So it's not impossible to find, it's just that you got to find someone who's pursuing God. And guess what? When you are pursuing God, regardless of this religion of dating, when you are pursuing God, you're going to be pursuing a lifestyle that involves being honest, being trustworthy, building yourself up, finding out what your strengths and weaknesses are and working on them. Leveraging your strength, overcoming your weaknesses with God, and becoming a person who eventually would be this amazing person to be in a relationship with, on both sides. So that's the thing. A relationship, a marriage, a life involves God, and without God, all the structures fail. Whether it's a working structure in a business, where it requires God's ideas of diligence, of faithfulness, of honesty, or whether it's a relationship that involves trustworthiness, faithfulness, purity, all those kinds of things. Don't just jump to the conclusion that this is impossible to find. It's not impossible to find, because it's not impossible to find people who are seeking God. But if you are surrounding yourself with people who are not pursuing God, then it's going to be possible to find in those places. But guess what? There are places where you can find these ideas that, guess what, now it took you maybe 10 years, 15 years, or however old you are at this point, and you're seeing what you actually want. Now you realize, hey, I actually want the things of God, and godly people have always been following that and have it, and now, okay, you fell short. But hey, guess what? I can be restored. Come back to God. Pursue God, pursue His ideas. He's come to give us life abundantly. The blessing of the Lord adds no sorrow with it, meaning the so-called blessings of the world actually damage you and come with sorrow, but the blessings of God don't come with sorrow. So I'm saying follow God, because you are designed to want God's ideas. The world has deceived you. God has blessed me in a way where when I entered the working world, I ended up being in positions where I could see entire organizations and communicate with people and have them tell me stories and ideas, and this is what I found. I found out that we are looking for God's ideas, we need God's ideas, all these principles align. So eventually, as God has been training me and developing me and showing me that, okay, you know what, the information sources in this world are taking you away from spirituality. You're taught out of it in high school. If you ask a lot of people, most people I think who are atheists because they were taught evolution in high school. So high school trains you out of God and out of spirituality, which is a deception. Then you have the media, the mass media of the music industry, the movie industry, that later on one realizes purposely takes out God's ideas and pushes sinful ideas. I always used to naively think, like everyone else. Firstly, when I started studying marketing, I didn't know that when there were products in movies, this was pre-social media where there have been lessons about product placement. I'm saying this is pre-product placement education. I just thought products were in movies. Studying marketing and realizing these products are purposely placed, understanding what branding is, how one layers these ideas onto a brand, and people purchase a brand in order to get those ideas. Guess what? That's a spiritual thing. That's a spiritual desire. But it doesn't get taught as being something spiritual. It just gets taught as emotion, when it's emotion that's actually triggered by the spirit. So all these things, like even the consumer decision-making process, is a spiritual design that plays itself out in our emotions and in our physical actions and the results of those physical actions. These are structures that all exist in the spirit first, that have a huge, if not entire, spiritual component. So we're looking for these spiritual things, we're looking for spiritual gifts, we're looking for the spiritual fountain that results in our being enlightened, being filled with emotion, and getting all these ideas that give us a sense of self. That's what marketing involves. It involves creating a brand and layering all these ideas of this brand. That's why sometimes people mistakenly worship brands, worship celebrities mistakenly. When all celebrities are basically people who've been branded well, which means they have had ideas layered on them. So you have an appreciation for it, but an appreciation that these are ideas that God created. So the ultimate glory goes to God. And when you give then an item or that person the glory without God, then, or the glory above God, then that becomes an idol. So remember, any person in a position of power has been placed there because God allowed them to be there. If they are doing bad, it's because they're choosing to do bad. But they can still choose to do good in that position. So that's the situation that people find themselves in. Branding, celebrityism, all these things have this effect. But like I said, God has been showing me, okay, so you've got now the structure of dating that's deceiving you, then you have the information sources, your schooling system, the music, the media, the news, then psychology, which has a lot of elements. Like if you have to research Freud and you realize the evil that he was involved in, check out Candace's own research about these types of things. But what I'm trying to say is, look at the banking system. When you really get deep into so-called conspiracy theories, but they're not. What is a conspiracy theory? It's just to say that a group of people planned to do something. A theory based on a suspicion by what we are observing. So eventually the whole world seems like it's against God and is trying to damage you, and it's like, am I going crazy? But no, it wasn't the case, because when God was showing me all these things, you have researchers who've got the receipts, like Candace owns, who got the receipts that's showing that, hey, here's the paper, here's the evidence, and a lot of it is coming out now in 2025. It started off, I'd say, in a big way during COVID, when one could actually see the extent and the depth of the influence of those who were trying to deceive us, of the pharmaceutical industries, and how they reach got into the education systems, into the political systems, into the media, everywhere. Governmental organizations, outreach. I'm just saying, they were silencing doctors who were using common sense, doctors who have had experience with certain medications for years. Somehow this reach of deception was so far and so effective. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Essentially what I'm trying to say is that throughout my life, God had shown me that these structures have been deceptive. The evidence of this deception is being shown now. But also, one can trace it back to the late 1700s, during the period of enlightenment, which is actually the period of darkness. Because what it was a creation of a modern world that glorifies human achievement. But guess what? It was actually a movement away from spirituality, which is why all the structures that we have now in society don't acknowledge the spirit, because it was something that was designed to not acknowledge the spirit. In fact, it was something that is designed to go away from God. So it wasn't just the worldwide, it was way before that. And even before that, all the structures that we see, one could have seen it in the Pharisees, the same Pharisees that killed Jesus. The entire modern world has been geared to direct you away from God. Which is why the Bible always talks about the ways of this world. You are in this world, but you're not of this world. What is this world? It is the modern world. It is the world that's rebelling against God, the world that's moving away from God, the world that is choosing to disobey God. This deception can be seen when you dig deep and you follow the rabbit holes and you see the cover up in the scientific community, the cover up in the archaeology community, the cover ups everywhere. You start to wonder why and how. How were the pyramids built? Why? Who's covering up this knowledge? What about free energy? So I had been in that situation where God has been showing me all these things. By God's grace, there have been information sources that have been backing up what God had showed me. Otherwise, I would have been completely lost. I would have been like, God, you are teaching me to be something that's completely different of literally everything in the entire world. Because like my life, I've lived it in a way to seek first the kingdom of God, but also through the Spirit. Not through my own understanding, but through the Spirit. And what the Spirit has been showing me is every single structure and every single function, all of these things in society. So, sometimes I would wake up and be like, is it everything? How can it be everything? Because God was showing me different topics and different over time, over the years of my life. Like I said, it was dating, then it was education, then it was business, then in government, media, music, movies, banking, the reserve banks, the historical power of the reserve banks, trade tariffs, and how it affects developing countries. Everything. Thank God. Like I'm saying, people like Candace Owens, Joe Rogan, all they doing God's work. The conspiracy theory, like I said, they are red herrings, meaning they are conspiracies that have been leveraged in order to discredit people who follow conspiracy theories. But that was done by CIA ops, deep ops. We get deep into the psychology of this. But what I'm saying is that God has showed me the truth. And this is what it is. That the world is designed to deceive you, to take you away from the Spirit. So follow God, follow the Spirit. And when you do that, then all these structures that existed spiritually first and that we implement into the world, now that it has God in it, then they can function. So when you're in business, when you're in relationships like friendships and marriage and in society and sports, now when you're pursuing God's ideas because you have a fear of God, because you have reverence for God, now all these structures and ideas can thrive and can bear beautiful spiritual fruit instead of it degrading. When you have people who want to be dishonest, when you have people who want to take advantage of others, when you have people who are opportunists in a bad way. So that's the contrast. A world with God and a world without God. And the thing is, a sinful world requires godly people, otherwise it will in itself destroy itself. So it's like it wants people, you will notice it wanting people to follow good ideas, and then it will take advantage of people who follow those good ideas. But that's when you're in the world. When you're with God, then you have God's hand upon your life. You have His blessings and those spiritual fruit that are beyond. So it's not just about money, and this is what God showed me about money. Because I kept thinking, okay, I serve an infinite God. I should be like a billionaire. I should be this. I should be that. Everything that I have should be better than what it is. Instead of this car, I should have another type of car and those kind of things. And I believe that God can do these things, and if He doesn't, it's because He's directing you down a different path. So when I was looking at the path, I'm like, God, is this the best path for me? And God showed me that the middle class is the richest class. Because in the Bible, it talks about rich men, it talks about poor men, and I noticed that Jesus ended up in the middle class. One could say upper middle class, but I'm just trying to say, so why is that? It's because if you're poor, you're going to be struggling, right? If you're rich, a lot of times, people who are excessively rich got those riches dishonestly. It results in spiritual poverty. So you have people who are financially rich, but they are spiritually poor, which is why they start looking for all these so-called luxury items, which are just ideas layered on brands, When you want things that are handcrafted, when you want things that are rare, things that people don't have, you're looking for these spiritual ideas that have meaning. But guess what? If you're pursuing sin, like lies and deception, then you're not going to find meaning, or that meaning is going to be fleeting. It's going to be fountains that run dry quickly. So the richest class is the middle class, because they are both financially well off and spiritually wealthy if they're living a godly life. As the Bible says, you don't have because you don't ask, but also the Bible says that if you're not happy, it's because you're not thankful for what you already have. Like at the bare minimum, if you have life itself, it's something that you can be thankful for. I remember one time I was on a flight, and this guy, his mom had measles while she was pregnant with him, and he was born blind and also has like fits, and he spent his whole life being this way. It made me realize how blessed I have been just for health and just the ability to see and the ability to function every day, and yet this guy is living his life. He's finding things to find joy in, making friendships. It really got me to think. And that's what it is. It's about just looking at what you have. Because even when you have excess, because I've been in situations where I have had excess of certain things. And I think there's only so much one can enjoy. There's only so much capacity that you have. Like somebody who has like 15 cars. You can only enjoy like one car at a time. Or if you're looking at if you are going to enjoy them in different ways, you're going to be looking and enjoying the cars. But okay, so then you're treating your cars like model cars, so then somebody who doesn't have the finances can buy model cars and enjoy the angles and the design and the ideas that are layered on these vehicles that have been designed by engineers in relation to those cars without spending that kind of money. It all boils down to being thankful, being grateful for God's glory, and not comparing, because what we have is for our purpose. So if you don't have something, it's because you're not purposed for that, but then you got to find out what you are purposed for.
Yeah.